Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself, a podcast that helps us to keep kind, creative, and connected. My name is Rose Kondo, and I'm your host. I'm a poet, a performer, an honorary Manchester gal, and I love connecting with communities. In each episode, I talk to a fellow creative about their work and some of the things that help them to keep well along the way, and we use the letters in the word kind as a kind of conversation roadmap. Today, we talk about loads of amazing things: variety in creativity, the power of community in poetry, the importance of taking breaks, and football somehow once again gets mentioned in our conversation. We also talk a little bit about grief, so please take care if that's something that you are navigating right now. Before we start, have a quick check on what your shoulders are doing. If you're like me, I carry a lot on my shoulders, like a backpack or canvas grocery bags, but I also carry a lot in my shoulders: tension, anxieties, stress. And it's a good thing to check in with them sometimes, and maybe if they're like up around my ears, to take a breath and just let them lower a bit. So, with that in mind, let's get these kind words rolling. My guest today is poet Culain Wood. Culain has performed on many stages, including at Edinburgh Fringe, Kendal Calling, and twice at Glastonbury Festival on the Poetry and Words stage. Culain lists Joe Strummer, David Attenborough, and Eric Cantona as his inspirations, but he also writes for his daughters, so they will always know what he stood for and who he stood up to. I have to say, creativity runs in this family because Culain's sister Neve is an amazing illustrator and created the artwork on my website, as well as for the posters for Rhyming Words, which is a stellar poetry night that Culain hosts at the Rat and Pigeon in Manchester. Welcome, Culain, to Have a Kind Word with Yourself.
Thank you very much, Rose. I think it's about time I did have a kind word with myself.
It's always a good thing to remember. And I guess to start us off, I'd love to know, what are some kind words you've heard recently?
Some kind words I've heard recently. I think the biggest one, it's completely away from poetry. I also coach a football team, my youngest daughter's football team, and I got thank yous. And those were the kind words that I got. I got thank yous from 9, 7, and 8-year-old girls. And it was, the culmination of a long season, 10 months of football. And then on Saturday, when I was supposed to be giving them all their trophies, they gave me a big thank you. So that was the kindest word recently. And then actually keeping it back to poetry, Kieran King's, you might know him, his Slamchester night on Sunday night, there was a poem from a poet called Paul Robb, and he summed up in his poem what the Manchester poetry scene in particular, means to him as a new poet, but not just as a new poet, but as a person as well. So yeah, the thank you from the girls and the thank you, I suppose, from Paul as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, I am familiar with Kieran King. I think I've met him once or twice before. Those sound like lovely, kind words, and especially the ones that come by surprise. That you wouldn't think that the girls you've been coaching would kind of share it that way. And I do remember Paul Robb's poem from the Slam, and it was just such a tribute to the scene in Manchester that you contribute to incredibly well as well. And it kind of connects with the next question, which is about how our paths first crossed. And I wonder if you remember back to
Yeah. So the very first time I met you, Rose, I was fanboying. In fact, I was performing at a Pumpkin Drublick open air gig. I think it would have been in August 2020, maybe, sometime around then. And you performed as well. And I was there with my now fiance, Molly, and we were watching your performance. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm not just trying to, this is not just because it's your podcast, Rose, but the way that you introduced poems was something that I hadn't seen before. So you were almost like having a conversation with the audience, and then the the barrier between the conversation and the beginning of the poem was impossible to spot. Not for all of your poems, but maybe for, I don't know, the majority in that particular set. And then I went home from that set thinking, that's what I want to do. And then I've been making a bad stab at it ever since. But yeah, I think we came to meet you after the gig and we said hello, bought the book, and then, we bumped into each other intermittently. And then it's within the last couple of years, we've become friends. And obviously paths have crossed at different poetry events and away from that as well. So yeah, I was a fan and now I'm a friend.
Love that. Talk about unexpected kind words too. That's really nice to hear now. And I really remember that night as well. And you were so kind when you came up and said some like such lovely things. And I remember meeting Molly then too. And just as a side note, I remember about that night as well, because it was sort of in the pandemic times.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also not feeling my best. I have a chronic illness and was having a flare up of it. And you said some really lovely things. And Dominic Barry, who's another amazing poet, was there. And he, I think, messaged me afterwards to say some nice things. And that's such a tonic for when you're not feeling well. So yeah, that was really nice.
Good.
And yeah, going from fan to friend, what a lovely alliteration. So just before we jump into our kind chat, you do a lot of creative work. You write and you host events, you perform a lot. And I wonder if there's something that you really love about the creative work that you do.
Yeah, I think it's the variety. So I still struggle with calling myself a poet, really. I still, I don't tend to do that. And I still struggle with calling myself an artist, I suppose. I just do these different things and enjoy doing them. At the minute, I've got one book finished in collaboration with Neve, my sister, as you said. I've got 3-track EP, house EP, coming out with a Manchester producer, hopefully in June. And it's all these things that if you don't, meet different people, sometimes by accident. Obviously, meeting my sister wasn't, well, I mean, I guess biologically it was by accident, but it was inevitable, really. But then meeting the producer happened at a Mike Garry gig I was hosting. So I think just making myself available, putting myself forward for these things, and then also when they're not available, creating them myself, like with rhyming words. I suppose opportunities lead to more opportunities. And my sort of mantra with it is when it stops being fun, then I'll just stop. And even if that's for a bit or for a while, forever, when it isn't fun, then there's not really much point.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to go by in any kind of pursuit, but particularly with creativity. I love what you say about the variety and it is such an interesting thing to title yourself as something because it sometimes comes from other people. I remember years ago when people first started like either introducing me or referring to me as a poet. Inside, I would get itchy and go, Am I? Am I allowed to
Yeah.
call myself that? Other people are. And I think just staying true to the fact that you're doing the things, you're making the
Mhm.
things, and it falls under the heading of creative artist. But I'm glad that you're finding fun and joy in it. Yeah, we'll wait with excited anticipation for the EP to drop. And when is the book going to come out with Neve? Do you know?
So it's under review at the minute with a couple of literary agents. It's still in the sort of submission phase, really. But the book's finished. I'm obviously going to say it's brilliant.
Of
Um,
course.
it's called Our Dog Died, but Now She's a Robin, which sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but once you get into it, you'll understand why. So the book is based on my 2 daughters believing that our dog, who passed away in 2024, now still comes to visit us as a robin. And it's a poetic journey through that, from the grief of finding out that your dog has died to the joy of spotting her in different places throughout the next couple of years. And I won't give too much away, but it's beautifully illustrated by Neve. It's kindly edited by the wonderful Dominic Berry. He gave me some really important feedback that sort of changed the direction of it overnight, really, and has made it into something that we're really proud of, something that we think it's enjoyable just as a story, but there's also potentially some help that people might find in it, not just for losing their dog, but for losing everything from your keys to your nan. So
That sounds amazing. What a great title. And I love that the seed of reality that it's come through. And holy moly, Dominic Barry, hey, mentioned twice already. I need to
I
get him on
know.
this podcast for sure. Looking forward to when that comes out into the world. We'll jump into the kind chat now. And as you know, I use the word kind as a framework for our chat. So each letter represents a word that's connected to kindness that we can kind of delve into. And so the first letter is K. And I'd love to know what is in your kitchen. What is in your creative kitchen? How do you cook up kindness for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, creatively, it's taking breaks. I think for me, and whether that's planned or whether it just happens naturally, I sometimes suffer with a bit of burnout after I've done a couple of gigs in a short space of time, or even not just gigs, but just speaking to human beings can be a lot. So after that, for a while, it's knowing that it might be a good idea to have a month where you don't do a gig, or it might be an idea to have a month where you don't try to write something, or you don't try to edit something or to submit something. You just go, okay, I'm just going to focus on the other part of life, which is like maybe earning money or coaching football or being healthy, all that sort of stuff. Because as most people know, in, I suppose, the creative arts, whatever form it is, it sometimes comes with pints. It sometimes comes with late nights. And
Hmm.
whilst those are fun and absolutely necessary, they do take a toll eventually. 3 years away from 40, and I think I'm speeding up that aging process with every gig I do. So I think in my creative kitchen, uh, knowing when to take a break instinctively or planning that in is really, really important. And also not putting too much pressure on yourself when you're in that break for when it's going to end. Um, and I'm fortunate enough now to be in a position where people book me for gigs. I don't necessarily need to go looking for them, and that's a really privileged position to be in. I'm really grateful for it. But it's quite nice because you're not constantly looking, and I think sometimes when you're constantly looking, you can end up stretching yourself too thin,
Yeah.
spreading yourself too thin, to go with the kitchen analogy.
I love that. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And it's an important one to remember and an easy one to forget. But I think definitely as you get busier and busier with gigs, it's a tough one because they're great. They're so enjoyable. You have good chats for the most part. Sometimes they're
Yeah,
tough, but for the most part, they're really enjoyable. You have good chats with people, and so it can feel a little bit like, well, I don't need a break from this. I feel really
yeah,
nourished. I feel really buoyed up by the pals, the poetry pals I've connected with. But it does definitely take a toll, and it's come up a little bit in these conversations that you can only be your best self when your cup is full, really.
yeah. I think the best example I can give of when that was needed was last July into August. I did a gig at Kendal Calling, the festival up. Well, it should be Kendal, but it's actually closer to Penrith. I'm not going to pull them up on that though. And I did a gig there with some poetry friends. The gig was a 20-minute gig. The festival was obviously a 3-day weekend, so there was a lot of things that happen at festivals going on. And then from that, I went straight to, I think literally got home, and then I'm trying to remember which order I did it in. Then I did a audiobook launch with some great poetry friends, Louise Machin, Shaq, and Noor Iman, and we put together an audiobook launch in a chapel in the middle of nowhere. We put on a bus to get people there. We arranged the parking ourselves. It was a bit ambitious. It was great. We packed out this tiny little chapel, but we were sort of, we were all stretched trying to organise that. And then the day after that, I hopped on a train up to Edinburgh Fringe to go and perform at the Loud Poets Slam Final obviously in Edinburgh. So those three things came in rapid succession. And then when I came back, 2 days later, I hosted Rhyming Words at the Rat and Pigeon. So it was like, it felt like a world tour crammed into the space of about 6 or 7 days. But it was good fun. But then after it, I was like, oh my God, no more poems for a while.
That's intense.
Yeah,
That is really intense for sure. Those all have such different needs as well, from
yeah,
performing to launching something to hosting. And yeah, I can imagine you were a bit zonked after that. I think the practice comes into plays is anticipating to kind of create some space after that.
yeah.
So this podcast is going to come out, I think in sometime in June, and we are now in the middle of May. And my lovely husband Kieran and I have just come off of a weekend of a lot with the Huddersfield Literature Festival and Slamchester. And about a
Hmm.
month ago, I said to Kieran, let's book the Monday afterwards off. And
Yeah,
Kieran, who's often kind of a machine, was like, I'll be fine. I'm working from home. It's okay. I was like, let's book the Monday off.
yeah,
And Sunday night, we were like, hooray for past us for making that choice because we were
yeah,
exhausted, happy and exhausted. So,
definitely.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, long may that practice continue for you. And we'll go on to the next letter, which is I. And the word I've chosen for I is inspiration. And where do you find inspiration, Culain?
Often it comes when I'm about to fall asleep, and I reckon some of my best poems have been written and forgotten in the time it takes between closing my eyes and actually falling asleep. Now, those are the times when I've not been able to stir myself to write it in my notes app, and then I spend the next day going mad over like a couplet that's been forgotten. But I think inspiration comes from a lot of the time comes from my kids, um, and sometimes from the not from the beauty of being a parent and the joy from being a parent, but from the really shit bits that are really difficult and challenging. And then obviously the love and the joy supersedes all that, but they don't take away from how difficult it can be. So I think there's inspiration in that. There's inspiration in the Manchester poetry scene. So listening to people talk about the things that they care about, listening to people talk about anything really. I mean, I was at a gig the other day and the range went from kink aware psychotherapy through to a 16-year-old cat. So that the range is there. That's it. That's inspiring. Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes it's often inspiring. And then I think the original reason I started writing poetry, going back to when I was in a punk band, over a decade ago, was to try and um, express some of my views about things that were happening. So I've always written about, I mean, I've got songs from 2009 written in support of the Palestinian people, written in support of the Palestinian struggle, and some of my poetry still is in a similar vein, necessarily, as I think people should and could, whether they're speaking to 3 people or 3,000. That definitely features, and then not just that. I come from a proud Irish family. I consider myself very Irish, so a lot of my writing, maybe not recently, but previously, has been about the Irish struggle, all different stages of that, whether it's personal, whether it's anecdotal, whether it's from my family, whether it's just from the country or the island as a whole. So I think when you said it in the introduction about David Attenborough, Joe Strummer, and Eric Cantona, well, those three are like my ultimate revolutionaries. I mean, Cantona is outspoken massively about the Palestinian cause. People maybe don't know that, but he is. He's a real champion of the Palestinian people and a real champion of people that have been afflicted by horrible things all over the world. Aside from that, he was one of the most beautiful footballers I've ever seen play the game. The reason I fell in love with football. I met him actually in November, which was exciting.
No,
Yeah,
amazing.
and then obviously David Attenborough is a revolutionary in the sense that he, has guided us, all of us, our parents and our grandparents, through a changing world, and has basically told us if you don't do something about it, then this is what awaits you. Whether or not we listen to him, I don't mean me and you, Rose, I mean the
Mm,
world listens to him, remains to be seen, I think. So important, so important. So there's a lot of my inspiration comes from his sort of ideologies, and maybe not even necessarily from him specifically, but just from the importance of looking after the world that we live in. And
mhm.
then Joe Strummer, the ultimate revolutionary in my eyes, unapologetically political in his writing, um, a vital voice now as he was in the 70s and even through to the 80s, 90s, early noughties with the Mescaleros. Just yeah, so they're almost like my holy trinity, those three. And I think with things I'm writing about, would they approve of this poem? And I think if I think Canton I quite like this, or Joe would be a fan of this, or David Attenborough might not appreciate all the swearing in this one, but I think he'd like he'd like what it's about. Then I sort of that's the way that I guide the writing inspiration wise, I think.
Yeah, amazing. David Attenborough is such a source of optimism as well because he's unafraid to show the bleakness of the way the world is being treated. And yet,
Absolutely.
anytime I watch any of his programs, I feel uplifted by the end. So there's a special magic with that for sure. Can I also just say, it is astonishing to me how often football is coming up in my conversations with people. Genuinely,
Really?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Who knew that there was such a connection between football and kindness? But here we are.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't know, to be honest. There we go.
yeah, exactly. For Canadian listeners, we mean soccer.
For everybody else, we don't. We mean football.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, I like that holy trinity of inspiration and for reasons that are very particular to you. And I think what I hear a lot of you saying in that too is knowing yourself for where those channels of inspiration come from. So it's not as though it's these people have kind of been plucked out of the ether, the zeitgeist. Like these are people who are really profoundly speaking to you, and then you're sort of channeling that inspiration through the writing that you do.
Definitely. And I think I found them all at different stages of my life and didn't really draw the fact that they were so important as a three until maybe relatively recently, maybe they're like the last I keep saying 6 to 7 years, but I'm very aware that saying 6, 7 has got kids in my house going nuts recently. So let's say 7 to 8 years. But yeah, it's a funny one, and it was never like a planned thing. Nobody ever asked me who are your three biggest inspirations. It was just that I think I maybe all of a sudden became aware of it. A good friend of
Mm.
mine who's a folk singer, or used to be a folk singer. He's now in a punk band. He's also an artist. Cavan Moran. He lives in Macclesfield. He painted me the three, like portraits of those three in 2020. I've still got them somewhere. I did used to have them up. I maybe should put them back up. It was in his own style. They're beautiful, and I think he'd asked me, who would I like him to paint? And when I said those three, I was like, they're that important to me. Those three. So yeah,
Oh, that's amazing. As you were talking too, I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a way to kind of illustrate that. And of course, that's already been done. That's
yeah.
awesome. Wow. This also kind of leads nicely into the next letter. It's like I've done this on purpose, which is N, and the word I have for N is noticing. And I think you've spoken really beautifully about where you notice you are drawing inspiration from. And I guess I'm asking the question now more specifically about kindness. What are you noticing about kindness these days?
I think I'm noticing that it can be harder to come by, especially in the world of work. Like I work for myself, haven't been an employee for a good long while. I work for myself, but having experienced the way that people speak to each other in the workplace, the shortness, almost cutting corners. And I suppose there's a conversation about AI and co-pilot in there as well. That we might be saving ourselves 15 minutes out of the hour, but we're losing the conversation, the checking in on people just for the sake of speeding things up. And then what that means is when you've got all this time left, what are you doing? Well, you're on your own. You're seeking boredom fillers. You're seeking a dopamine hit when you could be getting that from exchanging in a meaningful conversation with somebody that you work with or that you live with. Just I think the speed of things means that all exchanges are reduced, and then kindness is one of the things that suffers because there's no need for a please if you've got an instruction for somebody. There's no need for a how was your weekend if something can be done half an hour more quickly on a Monday. So I think that it's harder to come by, and then it makes it more noticeable, going back to the letter that we're focusing on, when you do see it and when someone does take the time to just be like, skip the AI, skip the co-pilot, actually find out who they're speaking to. And I think the big thing for me, and you will hopefully In fact, no, not hopefully, I know with absolute certainty resonate with this. You and your partner, Kieran, the importance of not cutting corners, artistic and creative corners, for the sake of speed and the sake of cost. If I'm not making it clear, the point I'm alluding to is people using AI for posters for creative events,
Mm.
which is a bugbear of mine. It's a bugbear of a lot of people's at the minute. Obviously, I'm in a fortunate position. I use Neve and pay Neve to do those posters. You
Hmm.
have worked with Neve as well, so I know that you value the importance of other creative, other disciplines. I know that
Hmm.
Kieran does because he uses the same person for his Slamchester posters, and I think that I think I've sort of rambled here a little bit with the talk about AI removing kindness, but I think it does because people, they see a speedy solution, they see something that's going to save them time and money, and maybe even save them a conversation. Because you ask AI to do it, you don't have to say to Neve or to, I don't actually know the name of Kieran's illustrator for the Slamchester posters, so maybe you can drop them a mention as well because they do beautiful posters. And it
Yeah, he's
removes,
called Stephen Bundy. He's fantastic.
there you go. So and you remove the need to have that conversation with other creatives because you just rely on artificial source. Do you know what I mean? So I'm noticing that kindness is harder to find, so that when it is there and when you do have the conversation with the illustrator, with the promoter, with the poet, with the writer, whatever it is, you do notice it more. And it's a bit of a shame because you then reflect and you go, oh God, they were so kind. They were so, lovely. And actually, they might not have been. It might just be that they're doing something that the vast majority of people don't anymore. So yeah, I guess it's so important to do that. It's so important to be that. But I wish it didn't have to be that. Not that it's forced, but maybe I wish that it wasn't that noticeable. And you might need to cut half an hour of that last chat.
I'm not cutting a word. I think that's amazing. And as one who I tend to go around the houses with answers as well, uh, ironically, I kind of think that fits with what you've been talking about in sometimes taking the time to talk, or as you say, ramble. I don't think it was rambling, but to get through your point sometimes
Yeah,
takes a little while. So this isn't a 10 words or less kind of
yeah.
podcast chat. So
Copilot would have shaved that one down, right? Wouldn't it?
but yeah, you're right. There's a loss of the nuance of connection. So I remember meeting Neve for coffee to talk to her about the illustrations that I wanted for my website. And it was such a lovely process. She's so talented and so skilled. And I immediately felt this connection and confidence in going, oh, okay, I'm gonna like mind poop out a bunch of ideas. I'll
Yeah.
send you some pictures and color palette. And then what she came up with, I was like, I didn't know that's exactly what I wanted. But that was her translating, like being open to listening to my ideas and
Yeah.
translating her creativity. And I mean, I love the posters that she does for rhyming words as well. And like you say about Stephen Bundy, whose Instagram handle is Twisted Illustration,
Mhm.
he always has them wrestling themed, and he and Kieran have been friends for ages, so he knows how to pull out some of those ideas, the kind
Yeah.
of vibe that the poster needs. Uh, and sure, you could get a nice, I don't know, snazzy image or something, but it's what
I,
I think what you're saying is what you're gaining doesn't account for what you're losing.
yeah, you're right, and I think yeah, you're right. You could get everything across in literally the click of a button. But personally, I have decided to not attend gigs where the posters are created by AI. I think obviously the name of this podcast is "Have a Kind Word with Yourself," and you are a kind person, probably a lot kinder than I am in understanding that. But for me, I'm like it's unkind, and it's not expensive to you. I mean, obviously, resources are limited and stretched more now than they ever have been, especially for people putting on gigs. But if you can find that, and even if it's not money, if you can find a way to, to shout them out and acknowledge them, and the dreaded exposure, then it's important. And I think really we should all be doing that. I think that and it's not just about taking a stance against AI. It's taking a stance for other creatives that do different things because people could write a poem or use AI to write a poem, go and stand up at a slam. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I think we need to notice when gigs and events are. It's easy for me to say this, of course, because I'm doing it, but I still believe it. notice when people are being kind and they're acknowledging the importance of other creatives and they're bigging up other creatives and they're shouting them out every opportunity. So yeah, notice when that happens, support those events. And if people are using AI, then maybe don't boycott them like I am, because maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe you should have a conversation and say, is there a chance that you want to rethink that? And just be frank and say, one, it looks terrible. And two, you could be building connection, giving somebody a boost.
Yeah, it's making the space for that conversation as well. And as you've been talking, I think sometimes about, so I work freelance, I work part-time with an arts charity. I'm sure you know this because of you working for yourself as well. It can sometimes feel like you have to really churn through a bunch of emails to just get caught up with things. And I always remind myself to start my emails with hope you're well, or how are you doing, or
Yeah,
happy Friday, or whatever it is. And I've sometimes thought of like timing myself on how long it takes to type that, because it is microseconds on my end, but could really help to have someone notice that on the other end going, "Oh, actually, how is my Friday? Yeah, it's pretty good," or
yeah.
whatever it is. I think it's remembering that other people will notice that.
Hmm.
And I think also what you were saying with shouting out at events. I've seen you do this loads at Rhyming Words, and Kieran certainly did this at Slamchester, of shouting out other people who are there in the audience, or some of the other work that a poet who's performing has done,
Yeah,
because it is that lovely platform to say, this is a really thriving community and pay
yeah,
attention to who else is here.
absolutely. Yeah.
So the final letter in our word is D. And the word I've chosen for D is dream. And I'd love to know what you dream of for kindness in the future.
I'd love the sort of kindness that I experienced when I was at primary school between friends to like pervade the community, because I don't know if it exists now in primary schools. In my experience, it does, but maybe to a lesser degree. I know that it doesn't at high school. I think maybe at high school, weirdly enough, it's actually got better than when I was at high school. When I was at high school, there were fights every day. There was bullying. Like it just wasn't pleasant. Fortunately, we had friends, and you could find that community in your mates and messing about, and looking forward to. I think for me playing football, but from my eldest daughter's experience of high school, the kindness is there amongst the kids, but it's not necessarily there between the staff and the kids. And there's just feels like it's a contest all the time and it's a battle. And so I think when I think back to real kindness, there was a real kindness in like playing on the field with your mates and the girls and lads playing football together and the little ones just watching out for them and making sure that they didn't get knocked over. Or the image of if there was a little kid, whether that, like a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old who was stood crying on the playground. They were stood crying on the playground for a minute, less than, before an army of older kids would walk them to the nearest adult and like try desperately to make sure that they were okay. And I think that doesn't really happen in the world. You might not see somebody standing there crying for a minute, waiting to be taken to an adult, but they might be showing some sort of emotion that means they're in need. And I don't know whether there's enough people that, would go and take them to an adult. I'm speaking like, metaphorically. If we could do that and we could see people that need it, and we could, instead of just saying, oh, read this, look at that, you should have done this, take them there, sit with them there until that they're okay, until they're ready to go. And I know it's hard, and I know that everybody's got their own problems, but I think I'd love that if people could just take the time to understand each other, to take care of each other. And it might start with your neighbours. It might start with literally the person that lives in the house next door to you. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a huge ambition. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. And I think that'd be the way to go. That if we looked after our neighbours, even if you don't particularly like them, take their bin out. If it's raining, I guess that, yeah, I think we'll solve the world's problems if you just take your neighbours' bins out when it's raining. That's the plan.
Do you know that could just fuel a revolution, I think.
Yeah,
It is often those small, very localized things that have profound impact for sure. And it speaks to, this has come up a few times as well in the podcast, of the how daunted we feel by how messed up the world is, how ineffective we feel we might be as just these single human beings in this giant planet. But it is those moments between people close to you, geographically close to you,
Yeah.
that can help to build that bedrock.
Hmm.
So it matters. It absolutely matters.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, he who plants trees knowing he will never sit under the shade of the branches has truly understood the meaning of life, that sort of thing. And so what I'm saying is, if you take the bin out for someone, don't expect them to thank you for it. Don't even expect them to notice it. Just do it, and that's spread it. And in my life, I've seen that recently. So my fiance Molly will do things for my two girls, um, without any expectation that they even notice it. I notice it, and she'll do it, and they'll benefit from it. And then examples would be things that she buys and puts in the fridge for them, and they don't know who's put it there, or taking the time to make sure that their hair is sorted, because I'm still pretty useless at girls' hair, and so that, and then not making a big fanfare out of it, just doing it. And then the other one is, like I said, I was at a presentation day for my girls' football team and the whole club, and there was a whole army of volunteers there who are doing things for kids that they don't even know because they're not on their team. Like
Mm.
me and my eldest were there about 6:30 on Saturday morning. It sounds like I'm bigging myself up, but I'm not. I'm just trying to give context. And we were unboxing literally thousands of trophies for hundreds of kids that we don't even know. And it's little things like that that we have to do, without any expectation that we're going to get a pat on the back, just because it feels good, and just because it's the right thing to do. So yeah, whoever said that quote, you might
Mm.
know about the sitting underneath the branches, and there's that film, The Man Who Planted Trees, as well. I think it might have been a book or an animation to start with. If you've never seen that, you should watch that, and it's important.
Yeah, definitely. I have heard the quote before. I can't think of who said it, but I'll look it up. I love that you mentioned the man who planted trees, because it's made me remember when I lived in Winnipeg and I worked for the Manitoba Theatre for Young People in Winnipeg, uh, a company came over from the UK. It might have been from Edinburgh, and they had a show called The Man Who Planted Trees, and it was this
Right.
beautiful puppet show.
Yeah.
And it was just it was taking that story and
Hmm.
bringing it to stage for a children's audience, and it was gorgeous, just
Hmm.
gorgeous. And they were still performing it in Edinburgh Fringe for years. I'll have to look
Amazing.
up and see if they still
Yeah.
do it, because I'll certainly put the link in the show notes. But just very much cultivating that idea of doing things because it feels nice in the moment and you know it's going to have an effect afterwards.
Definitely.
It makes me think of, in my conversation with Sharina Lee Sati a few episodes ago, she was talking about the sometimes there's this sense of transaction with doing kind things,
Yeah.
if and I guess karma is kind of built on that in a way, but doing something for its own sake because it's the right thing to do and a kind thing to do is enough. And then if
Yeah.
there is goodness that comes back from that, it's kind of a bonus.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. At Christmas time, I make this snack called nuts and bolts. I don't think I've made it for you and Molly yet, so I'll have to make sure you get some this year. It's a Canadian snack of cereal and pretzels and cashews, and it's a savory snack, and everyone thinks it's weird, and then they eat it and they go, "Please give me all that you have because it's delicious." And so I was putting it in little bags, and I wrote a poem about the ingredients, and I like hung it on the doorknob of all of our neighbors in the neighborhood. And bless Kieran, he was like, "What are you doing, you bonkers Canadian?" And I couldn't help myself. I really wanted to connect with him. And our neighbor directly next door brought over a card later in the day.
Oh,
Our
nice.
neighbor across the street came and dropped off some curry that they had made. And it
Amazing.
just like sparked these conversations of joy.
Love that. Yeah.
And, we now smile at each other and nod and stuff. And I'll admit, going and doing that, I had to really be brave. I felt really anxious about it, but
Yeah.
it brought forth just some really unexpected joy.
Absolutely. Even things like that, though, just smiling and acknowledging that there's another human being on the other side of the road or that lives near you. That's an act of kindness. And that's an act of kindness that, okay, maybe it happens up north more than it does down south. But I know some lovely Southerners. It does happen.
Yeah, definitely. I've really, really enjoyed this chat, Culain, and we're gonna wrap it up in a moment. I'm really intrigued with how unexpected has come up a bit in our chat, this
Yeah.
unexpected, surprising kind of arrival of kindness. So that's going to stay with me after this chat for sure. The tagline for this podcast is finding ways to keep kind, creative, and connected. And I
Mhm.
wonder if you have a top tip for how to do that.
Yeah, so it's something that I need to follow myself. And I was speaking to some Manchester poets about this at the weekend. So because I'm often busy with, work and life and kids and football and poetry, that I sometimes forget and neglect to go to other events and to support other events. Like I know and I feel confident that I do a lot to support the scene by putting my event on. But then whether I go to these other events enough, I just don't. And I see the same people, yourself, Kieran, the wonderful Biz, Dave Viney, people that put the things on. So, maybe top of that list would be probably Biz because I've never been to Poets Palace. and and I should have been. And I think that my top tip would be something that I need to pass on to myself more than anyone. So it's not like a preaching. This is just maybe my next plan is to attend those gigs. Other one, like I spoke to Becky there and Ilaria on Sunday, who, for listeners that don't know them, are currently or have previously been involved in putting on verbose at King's Arms in Salford. And I think I have been to that recently and within the last 12 months. But when I put on gigs 6 times a year and put out shout outs for people to attend, and they do, and they come, like, they fill the room at the Rat and the Pigeon, the top tip would be to go to those gigs, not expecting to get a gig from it, not expecting to, carve some sort of opportunity to just to go organically to support your mates, to support people that aren't your mates, that might be your mates. And then, as we have all found, I think probably universally, opportunities do come from it. You don't have to plan to, oh, I'm going to go to this so that this happens and this happens. You just go with an open mind to enjoy it, to connect. And if nothing comes of it, you've had a great night. You might have a hangover, but you've had a great night. And if something comes of it, even better. And then it's even more reason to go to some. So yeah, that top tip is for me mainly, but I think other people will, benefit from it as well. Get out there, go and see what's happening. Not just poetry nights. It could be somebody's got an open gallery for an afternoon, or someone's got a tasting menu, or someone's I don't know wants to show you their photographs. It doesn't matter whether it's a big event, whether it's a one-to-one, but go with an open mind and go and see stuff, go and do stuff with no expectation that it's going to turn into something, because it will turn into something.
Yeah, that is so beautifully said. Turn up, go, you'll be nourished in some way, whether it's just a good evening or friendships built and deepened and opportunities come. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The Manchester scene is in a real surge right now of poetry events. It's incredible. It for me personally makes me think of when I first came into the scene probably about 14 years ago, where I first met Kieran and all of that. There was such a buzz going on. It got disrupted through the pandemic, and it's really come back as something different and as vibrant, if not more so. And I'm sure that's happening in loads of places, both here in the UK and beyond. Canadian listeners, I know you've got stuff going on. Winnipeg is a buzzing place. But yeah, it's seeking out those things to turn up. Just turn up.
Yeah. And
Brilliant.
that's for me as well, mainly. In fact, not as well, mainly.
I think it's important, yeah, to have recommendations that we try to hold ourselves to.
So if you're listening to this in like July or August and you've not seen me apart from at a Rhyming Words gig, then I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. You can gently hold Culain to account.
That's it.
Do you have anything that you would like to promote or plug just as we finish up?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for the opportunity to. I think the first one would be to encourage people to come to the Rhyming Words nights, be a part of that. They happen on the second Monday of every other month. I think I've said that right. The next one is on Monday, the 8th of June. So whether you're listening to this after that, you may have just missed it. Then after that, it will be the second Monday in August. And then the second Monday of every month after that, every other month after that, forever and ever and ever, ever, amen, until I get bored or until it stops being fun. And we've done 10 at the Rat and Pigeon in Manchester so far, and they've all been brilliant. They've all been really good fun, really diverse array of performers, not just in terms of demographic, but in terms of content and in terms of styles. And that's happened organically, and I'm really proud of that. It's happened organically and naturally. I think one caveat that I will place on it is that the venue's not particularly accessible, which is something that I'd love to be able to work on, but I haven't got the budget to fit a lift in the Rat and Pigeon. And I'm not saying that to be facetious. It's just finding venues that are accessible in Manchester City Centre is difficult. The Rat and Pigeon have been brilliant supporting us, supporting the poets, supporting the performers, supporting me putting it on. Maybe it's something that I'd be able to address in the future. I know that there are accessible venues in Manchester. Mine, unfortunately, isn't particularly accessible. But if that's something that that doesn't put you off, hopefully it doesn't. It's every other month, second Monday. We usually get between, I think, 30 to 50 people. It goes on from 7:30 till about 10:30, maybe a little bit earlier. It's great. It's good fun. Usually 4 to 5 featured poets, massive open mic, loads of pints, or not pints. So I've spoken a lot about that. 2 projects of mine that are up and coming. The first is the book that we spoke about with my sister Neve. Our Dog Died, but Now She's a Robin. It's an illustrated children's book that's coming out, hopefully with a publisher this year. We'll see, though. Remain to see what happens with that. And then the other one is completely on the other end of the artistic spectrum. I've got a 3-track EP coming out with Manchester producer Blem. It's a spoken word house EP with 3 tracks on it. Hopefully, again, there's a lot of hope here, isn't there? When really I have the power to decide when that happens. So let's use a bit more positive talk. It will be coming out in June for you to listen to, be on Spotify under the name Blem and Culain Wood. And then, finally, Which Way the Words Grow was an audiobook I wrote and released with fantastic poets, Louise Machin, Shaq, let's give him his full name, Shaquille Millington, and Naughty Man, that was out in August of last year, but people are still listening to it. It's a exploration of growth through poetry and what that means to 4 completely different writers. It's available on Spotify. So I'll just summarize. Come to Rhyming Words. Look out for my children's poetry book, Our Dog Died, But Now She's a Robin. Listen to my banging 3-track house spoken word EP coming out in June. And then, if you need something to chill you out, Which Way the Words Grow on Spotify is available now. Variety.
I was just thinking that we've come totally full circle from the beginning of the chat. You are embodying variety and creativity. I can't thank you enough for doing this, Culain. Thank you so, so much, and look forward to crossing paths with you in Manchester very soon.
Nice one, Rose. Thank you.
Oh, I've got such community vibes after that chat. I mean, in addition to being a brilliant poet and performer, Culain has incredible skills in connecting people. He's mentioned so many amazing folks in this chat, and I will do my best to link to all of them and their work in the show notes. So please make sure to check them out, and let's keep those creative connections growing. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and we'll have another episode coming your way soon. You can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, where there are captions available. And if you want to share a comment, it would be great to hear from you. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can get in touch through my website, rosecondo.net. And on my website, you can see gorgeous illustrations by Culain's super duper talented sister, Neve Wood, also known as Little Badger. Our beautiful podcast music has been composed and recorded by Eleonora Rosca. And finally, please share this. Help us to keep kind, creative, and connected.